Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. Thank you so much tuning in. I have a new guest host for the day. Nice to see you, Atiba Medjun. Welcome to Rising.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, great to have you with us. Where are you from?
I'm from Washington, D.C.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, it's good to be home.
Great.
But what's on your radar today?
Happy to tell you. All right, Amazon CEO and Washington Post owner Jeff Bezos made a startling announcement on Wednesday. The opinion pages of his newspaper will adopt a new editorial mission of defending, quote, two pillars, personal liberties and free markets. Isn't that my job? Indeed, if the new WaPo slogan sounds familiar, it's because it's remarkably similar to the tagline of Reason magazine, where I also work as a full-time editor. Reason has long described itself as the magazine of free minds and free markets. It's my personal mantra, so that's nice. The similarity was not lost on social media users, several of whom noted that Bezos would be bringing WaPo into ideological alignment with an already existing media brand. Another news outlet expressing an interest in promoting civil liberties and economic freedom? I say great, the more the merrier. Freedom, after all, does not suffer from a lack of enemies within the mainstream media. News coverage from a progressive and even ostensibly neutral bent often focuses on, say, the purported harms of making any cuts to bloated government. See, for instance, a recent news story in The Washington Post that explained how devastating staffing reductions mandated by the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, had made it impossible to unlock the public restrooms at Yosemite National Park. A news publication with a liberty-friendly mission, on the other hand, might have asked whether the government bureaucracy within the Parks Department was intentionally starting with the most painful cuts of all in order to sap public enthusiasm for the cause of limiting government, something I described yesterday as, quote, malicious compliance. Here's a refresher on that term. What if the federal bureaucracy, sensing a threat to its self-preservation, was making things as awful as possible in order to scare the American people into thinking government can only function if it is vast and unaccountable? We actually have a term for this. It's called malicious compliance. It's when someone follows a new rule so closely without applying common sense such that they ultimately work against the rule's stated purpose deliberately. Point me. But back to Bezos. It's important to note that this declaration only pertains to the paper's opinion pages. News coverage will remain unchanged. Still, the new mandate for the opinion section is significant and has already resulted in the departure of opinion editor David Shipley. Bezos explained in a memo to staff, "I offered David Shipley, whom I greatly admire, the opportunity to lead this new chapter. I suggested to him that if the answer wasn't hell yes, then it had to be a no. After careful consideration, David decided to step away. This is a significant shift. Won't be easy. It will require 100% commitment. I respect his decision. We'll be searching for a new opinion editor to own this new direction." Bezos made clear, however, it's full steam ahead. He said, "I'm confident that free markets and personal liberties are right for America. I also believe these viewpoints are underserved in the current marketplace of ideas and news opinion. I'm excited for us together to fill that void." Critics of the move perceived it to be an incursion into the newspaper's editorial autonomy, though Bezos is the owner, of course, and is ultimately well within his rights to direct coverage however he sees fit. Additionally, there's a political valence to all of this. Bezos attended President Donald Trump's inauguration alongside other tech CEOs like Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, Google's Sundar Pichai, Apple's Tim Cook, and the perception is that the tech world has come to tolerate Trump, if not embrace him outright. Cynics will undoubtedly read Bezos' new mandate as an implicit pivot to the right. Well, it's not true that defending personal liberties and free markets necessitates joining MAGA or the Republican Party. Many of Trump's economic proposals, including his embrace of tariffs to some degree, contradicts free market ethos, and the GOP's social policies, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily in line with a liberty mindset. But by the way, I don't think it would be a good idea to only run opinions in the opinion section that I agree with, that agree with me. That's no fun. Even supporters of freedom and free markets can benefit from reading other perspectives. I take Bezos to mean that the unsigned editorials that come from the paper's perspective will have a new freedom-oriented focus, which is great. Not that every op-ed columnist will be required to adopt such a mindset. If the latter is the case, then I expect many columnists will be following David Shipley out the door. I certainly wouldn't miss Jonathan Capehart, who recently wrote about the, quote, gratitude we owe to Joseph R. Biden Jr. for his inclusive nature and willingness to grow. Or Eugene Robinson, who defended Biden's decision to pardon his son Hunter, saying he would have done the same for his child. Or Philip Bump, one of the most consistent and desperate defenders of the mainstream media's certainty that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. We all know how that panned out. My favorite WaPo columnist, Jennifer Rubin, has obviously already departed, and so she cannot resign in fury yet again. How sad. So, this was very unexpected news. Jeff Bezos declaring that the Washington Post will adopt like the Robby Soave editorial line. Didn't really see that coming. I don't quite know what to make of it. And, you know, even though I agree with that, I don't necessarily think columnists should be, you know, forced to just do things I agree with, but it is his paper, so he can order that. I don't know. What do you make of it?
Well, we live in a really interesting world right now where billionaires are running media sources. When Donald Trump came into office in 2016, one of the things that he kept talking about, or 2017, was fake news. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what to make of this yet. I do think this is going to have a trickle-down effect. I will continue to say trickle-down because what happens at the top will trickle down to the bottom. The question is, how is this going to impact the newsroom at the Washington Post? How is this going to impact the credibility of the news that they're providing? And if you're going to have an editorial page that's only focused on two areas or two things, then I feel like the Washington Post is moving more to a blog stream as opposed to being a credible newspaper.
Yeah, I heard a lot of angry voices from Washington Post writers, but you know, like the Wall Street Journal has news coverage of all varieties, and this is not going to impact the news coverage, he said. But then the Wall Street Journal's, you know, editorial page, the unsigned editorials from the Wall Street Journal, are basically in line with the supporting free markets and to some degree at least personal liberties. I don't necessarily agree with their foreign policy as much, but I basically agree with their economic analysis. So it sounds like that's what he wants the Washington Post to do. It is interesting overall to see the move of Bezos and these other tech CEOs to embracing, or if not at least embracing, you know, standing alongside Trump in his inauguration, being more, even if they're not more pro-Trump, they're certainly less willing to play ball with progressives and with Democrats. You know, people have joked that Jeff Bezos, who like me loves the Lord of the Rings, and you know, greenlit a new Lord of the Rings show that was only okay and kind of ruined by, some conservatives would say, woke predilections, has now become super conservative. That's funny.
Why is there such a big issue with using the word woke? And I say this because, you know, the opposite of being woke is being asleep. And we're looking at what the Washington Post has and what the Washington Post is doing. We also have to go back to 1972 Watergate. Mm-hmm. The Washington Post became the most credible source of information, along with the New York Times. And then others were feeding off the information that they were getting about what was going on in the Nixon White House. If we don't have a free press, and if we don't have a press where the owners are not pushing what the subject matter is going to be or aligned with the president, I don't necessarily want an owner of a news source to be buddy chum with policymakers. What I want them to do is just give us fair, unfiltered news so that we can look at it and make our own choices based on information and credible sources.
Yeah, I think that's what everybody wants. I think that's what readers of all kinds of types of news are looking for, exactly that. Lots more to come today on Rising. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a minute. President Donald Trump held his first cabinet meeting of his second term. The start of the meeting was a bit unique. Let's take a look.
The Bible says that blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Well, Father, we today honor you, and in your rightful place, Father, thank you for giving us this opportunity to restore faith in this country and be a blessing to the people of America. And Lord God, today in our meeting, we pray that you would be glorified in our conversation. In Jesus' name, amen.
Scott, that was a very good job you did. You've done that before, haven't you?
Many Americans probably think cabinet meetings should start with some prayer. Tech titan Elon Musk was also in attendance. Here he was discussing Doge's initiatives.
The overall goal here with the Doge team is to help address the enormous deficit. We simply cannot sustain as a country $2 trillion deficits. The interest rates, just the interest on the national debt, now exceeds the Defense Department spending. We spend a lot on the Defense Department, but we're spending like over $1 trillion on interest. If this continues, the country will become de facto bankrupt. It's not an optional thing, it is an essential thing. That's the reason I'm here. And taking a lot of flack, and getting a lot of death threats, by the way. I mean, like, stack them up, you know. But if we don't do this, America will go bankrupt. That's why it has to be done.
Musk and Trump also discussed their approach to cutting federal workers.
We wish to keep everyone who is doing a job that is essential and doing that job well. But if the job is not essential or they're not doing the job well, they obviously should not be on the public payroll.
And some of the secretaries, we're going to be going to them, we're going to be talking about it today, we're going to ask them to do their own DOGE. In other words, they'll look in their group and I spoke with Lee Zeldin, and he thinks he's going to be cutting 65% or so of the people from environmental. And we're going to speed up the process, too, at the same time.
Trump also took jabs at Canada and the EU over what he believes are trade imbalances. Trump confirmed that Zelensky is planning to visit the White House on Friday to secure the minerals deal. Health and Human Services Director Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said his team was continuing to follow the measles outbreak in Texas. And Trump also said if he were his Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, he'd fire everyone involved in the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal.
Trump also made some false claims during the cabinet meeting. For instance, he said that the U.S. has provided $350 billion in aid to Ukraine, while Europe has given $100 billion, which trackers say isn't correct. Various estimates show that the U.S. has given Ukraine around $120 billion total since the start of the war. He also said that the U.S. trade deficit was $200 billion with Canada, when U.S. government figures show it was just about $40.6 billion in 2023. Trump also overcounted the number of fentanyl and overdose deaths, 300,000 instead of around 110,000. He made other misleading or false claims on education rankings, inflation, and EU trade.
Not everyone appears to care that some of these statements are false. Senior editor at The Federalist, John Daniel Davidson, wrote on X, "In 4 years of the Biden presidency, we never saw a cabinet meeting that was as candid, unscripted, and informative as what we saw today from the Trump administration. The contrast isn't just striking, it's jaw-dropping."
Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett wrote on Blue Sky, quote, "We just watched President Musk hold a cabinet meeting. Absolutely unproductive. It's clear who's really in charge. All about trying to please Musk. What's going on here?"
Journalist Lindsay Penny wrote on X, "The former First Lady literally ran a cabinet meeting while the president sat in looking lost and confused. Remind me who voted for Joe Biden to be president." So, always nice to, in my view, to have the curtain pulled back and see how the sausage is made. Check in with our cabinet and our team, and there were some interesting things discussed. Elon Musk again emphasized that he's not going to get everything right, or not everything he says is going to be right, but that the work of cutting the bloated federal bureaucracy is necessary for the continued functioning, or the improvement in the functioning of the U.S. government and the strength of the American economy, and the good. It's for the good of the people, and there's a mandate to do it, so that's what they're going to do. And I liked Trump actually saying that they want to bring DOGE to the individual cabinets. Now, I think the cabinet secretaries should work on that rather than having Elon Musk or his team micromanaging every single cabinet department. I don't know how the man has time for all of that. But the spirit of DOGE will be alive and well in, I guess, in interior and education and defense. I certainly hope we have cuts for defense as well. Sounds good to me.
Well, when we come to the summer months, and there are going to be a lot of people who are going to want to take their children to national parks, and they're going to feel it there. They're going to see people right now who are worried about whether or not they're going to have jobs, whether or not it's next week, let alone during the summer months. And we're also looking at how healthcare and how healthcare insurance is going to impact seniors and young people. So I think that, you know, we keep hearing about cuts. We saw him last week with a chainsaw.
It's a beautiful image.
Perhaps he should have come with a scalpel.
Yeah.
Because the way that they're cutting this and the way that they're doing this, it's still not showing that there's any savings that are going on. It's just showing that they're making cuts, and it's really impacting Americans, and it's going to eventually start to impact consumer confidence. Let's just see what happens in the next few months. And the president is going to give his speech to Congress on March the 4th, I believe. And I'm interested in hearing what he has to say and how he's going to explain this.
But should we just view the federal government as a jobs program? I know that is really what Doge is doing, is cutting back on a lot of federal employment, but you know, the critique of having a large federal government that is just being viewed as a job program for lots of different people, for a lot of veterans. We spoke yesterday on Rising to someone who works for a pro-veterans advocacy nonprofit. I, of course, am very grateful to our veterans for serving our country, but you know, I am for just having the most qualified people in every job position and not really considering diversity or anything of that nature. I would put veteran status in that same category. We want our government to be lean and efficient because it's the taxpayers who pay for it, right? It's not charity. It shouldn't be viewed that way. And I think too many people, maybe in Democratic circles, have viewed it as it's a jobs program. And I don't think that's what the American people are on board with. They want the essential services covered, certainly, but not just like an endless, oh, you need a job, here's a job.
But what's essential?
Right.
Every time you go to the grocery store, you want to believe that the chicken, the eggs, the milk, all the meats, everything that you get that's there, you want to believe that that's going to be safe, right? You want to believe that it's consumable and it's not going to make you sick.
Yeah.
We keep talking about what's essential. And, you know, they're saying that law enforcement, military is essential. But the everyday needs of Americans is essential. How something gets from a farm to our table is essential. There are a lot of other things that federal workers provide. It's not a jobs program. Have some federal workers gotten comfortable within that? I do believe that is so. Are they feeling uncomfortable now? I do believe that's so. Is that necessary? I do believe that's so. But the process and how this is going about and how this is coming about, I don't think it is fair, and I believe that it's going to have dire consequences on our economy.
Coming up is an economic blackout on the horizon. We will discuss this interesting subject. Stay tuned. Call for a nationwide blackout is taking off on social media. No Buy Friday is a grassroots movement asking Americans to refrain from shopping at big stores tomorrow. A group called People's Union USA has been promoting the blackout online for weeks. Its founder, John Schwartz, commented on the blackout in a video posted to Instagram last week.
February 28th, the 24-hour economic blackout. No Amazon, no Walmart, no fast food, no gas, not a single unnecessary dollar spent. But let's be real. They don't need us. They use us. And for one day, we are going to finally turn the tables.
Social media users are calling for the boycott of major retailers and companies like McDonald's, Walmart, Target, Ford, and Meta, all of which have rolled back their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, largely in response to Trump's executive order encouraging private employers to combat DEI initiatives.
It was just weeks ago that the Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network held a boycott for DEI at a Costco in New Jersey to support the store and companies like it that are continuing to back DEI initiatives.
This movement against consumerism is designed to be a kick in the face to President Donald Trump's economy, as many Americans are struggling to keep up with surging grocery prices, sky-high housing costs, and gas. As you may recall, lowering gas prices was a core Trump campaign promise. According to various sources, inflation fears due to Trump's tariffs are putting many Americans on edge. 62% of Americans say the president is not doing enough to address inflation. Economist Mark Zandi told CNN, quote, "If confidence continues to fall for another 3 months and consumers actually pack it in, the game is over."
New unemployment numbers are out this morning, looking a little bit grim. The number of Americans filing for unemployment has risen to 242,000, which is the highest level in 3 months.
And this comes as thousands of federal workers have been fired over the past few weeks under the new administration.
Yes, if unemployment numbers are rising because government workers are who are not essential are being let go, I'm all fine with that. Tell me, so this is the left is striking in favor of DEI? That's what's happening here?
I hope they're not striking for DEI. I think, though, that they are recognizing that there have been jobs that have been lost as a result of DEI. And, I flew in here on Tuesday from Miami. and the flight path that we took, I could not help but remember that the president said that the reason why that helicopter crashed into the plane was because of DEI. And it was because of DEI. It was because people were fired because they fit what he felt was DEI initiatives or employment. But some of those employees are military vets. Some of them are people with disabilities who are fully capable of doing jobs. And so when we're looking at what this initiative and what taking a chainsaw to employees in the federal government is doing, we are feeling it all across the board.
I don't think DEI is responsible for the crash. I don't think we yet know for certain what was the reason for the crash.
But I think that fear around DEI and the language that people have been using around this to say that they are going to cut people's jobs and livelihoods is a direct result.
Well, okay, maybe we agree. I think firms, the government in particular, universities should not hire, admit, employ, engage people for any reason other than objective merit. I think if DEI means reaching out to groups that might not know about these opportunities and inviting them to apply, that's absolutely fine. If it's we need more of people who look X, Y, or Z or have X, Y, Z, whatever, and they are not as qualified based on test scores at universities or entrance exams or whatever, I think that's bad, and most Americans agree with me.
You know what? I love football.
Yes.
I love football. I love watching football.
Yeah.
And it took a DEI initiative, lack of a better word, to have more people of color in coaching positions in the NFL because those positions were being taken primarily by one set of the population. When we look back historically, unfortunately, America has a nasty history of discrimination. Mm-hmm. So there has been a need for these initiatives, but I also think that there is a need. I think that two things can be true. There's also a need for us to get out of the conversation about just talking about marginalized communities and really talk about the whole. How is this and how is by building up and by having diversity within our workforce, that people who are qualified to be in these positions, people who then are also given the right education tools to be able to be qualified to compete. And so there's a larger conversation to this for why there was a need for DEI. There's a larger conversation for why there was civil rights legislation that was passed during the 60s. And people would like to believe that that's an equal playing field, but there are a lot of people that don't feel that there's a level playing field.
Well, if we're just correcting discrimination, which is and should be illegal, certainly that's fine. If black people are not being hired to be coaches because of discrimination of the people who make the hiring decisions, that is illegal and should be corrected and undone. I agree with that. The component of DEI that I find most toxic for the workplace is some of these, and will be totally familiar to our viewers because I've talked about this a lot, some of the training workshops, some of the supposedly morale improvement schemes, the seminars people have to sit through. This is a whole industry of consultants who come in and talk to you about these topics in ways that I think are often very paternalistic and very, frankly, are often not appreciated by the employees of color, as far as I can tell from my limited exposure to them in conversations I've had with them, and also don't have a very good track record of necessarily improving morale within the company. In fact, there's good research on how the implicit bias test often backfires by having people contemplate their race or their identity more than they would do naturally in an unhealthy way, and it just ends up being a big financial grift for people like Robin DeAngelo, et cetera. That's my that's the me at my most hostile to the DEI concept.
The other day I had to fill out a form. It was a questionnaire about a service that had been provided, and in the question it asked age, gender, race. Mm-hmm. And for the first time I put prefer not to. Mm. And I think that that's really where, as a multi-generational American who is a descendant of both slaves and enslavers, you can tell by the color of my skin, something happened from being my ancestors being kidnapped from Africa and brought here.
Sure.
But the conversation here, to me, is I just want to be recognized as an American. And I just want to be able to be on an equal playing field and be able to sit here, have this conversation with you. And I think that there are millions of other Americans, not just black. So when I'm talking about coaches in the NFL, I'm not just talking about black coaches. I'm talking about coaches in general, people in general, human beings, and how we are treating each other as Americans. So I do, and I think that all of this lends itself to a necessary conversation. And that some of the things that I'm talking to my friends about, especially in this changing political landscape, is that maybe we have to do a better job of listening. We keep asking other people to hear us, but we also have to do a better job of listening so that we can find that pathway of more common ground to make America a better place for all of us.
Yeah, to me, I agree with that. To me, that's not DEI. That's just equality, which is totally exactly what I want. Especially, we should have legal equality. We should have measures to make people be treated more equally. I agree with that. I think most Americans do. Up next, Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan Tate, who have been held in Romania for 2 years, they are coming to the United States. We'll discuss. Stay with us. Big development in the case of the Tate brothers, Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate. The internet personalities have left Romania, where they had faced investigations into being human traffickers and forming an organized crime group. That's what they were accused of by the authorities. They are expected to land in Florida this morning. One of their lawyers, Joseph McBride, wrote on X earlier, Andrew and Tristan Tate have returned home to America. Yesterday, Romania rightly decided it did not have the evidence it needed to hold them any longer. Today, Andrew and Tristan Tate are free. All eyes on our FL defamation case.
Per the Financial Times, Trump officials had urged Romania to lift travel restrictions on the two brothers.
Prosecutors alleged that the brothers had tricked multiple women and eventually forced these women to participate in online pornographic videos while housing them near Bucharest. For instance, prosecutors said that the Tates made these women believe they were interested in a relationship when, in fact, they just wanted them to appear in the videos. The Tates were indicted in Bucharest over those accusations. They appealed, however, and the court ruled the case could not go to trial due to legal and procedural irregularities.
The Tates are extremely contentious figures in the social media realm. They're both former kickboxers who have since garnered a massive following for portraying a lavish lifestyle and promoting an extremely aggressive form of masculinity. Critics also say they're blatantly sexist and misogynist. The two also have an online course called Hustlers University, where they teach people how to make money on the internet.
In an archived version of Andrew Tate's website, in the part of the PhD program, he explains how he got rich. Part of that section reads, "My job was to meet a girl, go on a few dates, sleep with her, test if she's quality, get her to fall in love with me, to where she'd do anything I say, and then get her on webcam so we could become rich together." It's important to note that the Tates have vehemently denied all of the allegations against them. They are polarizing figures among conservative media. Some figures, including Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, have engaged with the Tates. Others, such as Megyn Kelly and Ben Shapiro, assailed the Tates as vile abusers of women. A colleague of Ben Shapiro, Daily Wire co-founder Jeremy Boring, wrote on X, "The way conservatives and conservative organizations respond to Andrew Tate arriving on U.S. soil will tell you everything you need to know about them. Any organization or host who embraces him is engaged in far worse than simple grift, though it is that. Andrew Tate is an enemy of any traditional American conservatism." Political commentator Chris Cillizza wrote on X, "Andrew Tate, no matter your politics, is a very bad guy." The reason we're talking about him is for various reasons. The Tates have attracted a following of very online young men, some of whom otherwise evince a kind of conservative or Trumpian politics. Tate, as I said, was interviewed by Tucker Carlson and has been received, I would say, somewhat friendly by Candace Owens. Other conservatives think absolutely not. Why are we sidling up to someone who was accused of really awful treatment of women, to say the least? Now, I should say, just because the Romanian authorities charged you with something doesn't necessarily mean all the case was airtight. They were not convicted. They had to be released because the case was mishandled. I have some degree of skepticism of the criminal justice system. Now, that said, there's the question of whether they're criminally liable for the things they did, which they beat the charges, they're out, fine, and whether they should be revered as upstanding personal heroes for conservatives, which seems like an obvious no, but that's where I'm at. Where are you at?
I'm laughing at this because we're even talking about this when, in our other segments we've been talking about federal workers. But in terms of this, why do people follow this kind of behavior? How have they gotten this following? Well, apparently, some guys need to figure out how to talk to a woman. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it makes me think about I can't remember the name of the show. I want to say the Tinder Swindler or something, where there was a guy who was swindling women out of money. The case with a woman in New York who they say she was swindling business people. I mean, these are personal choices. We're going to talk about personal liberties. I don't know, where this is going to go, where this story is going to go, but I imagine that once they touch on American soil, this is going to become a more story, and we may see other things come out of the woodwork that we don't know.
Yeah, I don't really want to have them. I mean, they're free men now; they can do what they want, And also, I don't think necessarily treating someone badly and doing the things that he describes, going on dates, sleeping with women, and then convincing them to participate in pornography. That's really skeezy behavior, really bad moral behavior. Was that all criminal? Is that the same thing as sex trafficking? Those are all questions from like a legal perspective that they weren't able to seal the deal on that. But that doesn't mean you have to. Not every person who is, even if they are a victim of whatever, the criminal justice system or the deep state, there's this tendency now among MAGA people or Trump people to embrace because the perception is that Trump has been mistreated by the deep state, the criminal justice system, and I agree with that to an extent, that everyone else who faces that must also be a political victim and must be embraced, from Rod Blagojevich to Eric Adams to now it's going to be Andrew Tate as well. And I think that's going to create a pernicious incentive for people to just, you heard it from Menendez, right? He gets convicted. There's literal gold bars in his socks or wherever he was keeping them. And he says, yeah, just like Trump, I'm a victim of another witch hunt. Like, Democrats will do this, and MAGA will make themselves easy marks if they just embrace anyone who has been persecuted for any reason.
I just wish that we would stop going and putting the labels in terms of MAGA, Democrats. This is what Americans are doing. The whole culture right now is really about money. Mm-hmm. So we have these few billionaires that are at the top. They say they're 1%, I think less than 1%, much less than 1%. And all of this keeps coming to how the society, how people in an I, me world are trying to figure out, how can I get something more than just the crumbs that keep tumbling down from the apple pie? And so, in terms of where this is in this story, it's talking about women who were offered, hey, let's build an empire together. So it keeps going back to our value system in America is built around money and about what we can have and what we can't have. And I don't know if it's necessarily MAGA versus Democrats or what have you. People are vilified within the media on fake charges or what have you, or deep state or whatever it is. But overall, this is why we need credible media sources so that we can get to the truth.
Yeah. Andrew Tate has always struck me as there's something just very sad about his whole mindset, because if you listen to his whole philosophy, like why he likes to own nice things, why he likes to own nice cars, for instance. He said it's not about the car itself, it's about feeling better than other dudes or something. I'm like, well, that's really sad. You have this thing that you actually don't value because you just want to feel superior to others. I think that's a very sad kind of mindset. I like to own nice things because I like the thing itself, right?
But
what's the point of anything we're doing? It's just to feel better than that you're going to be in this constant rat race and you're never going to be satisfied. And I don't know. It seems not good advice for people. It's okay to like things you like and live your life.
It's okay, and it's also okay to like nice things. The question is how you go about getting them.
Yes, indeed. Up next on Rising, we'll explore how Trump essentially eliminated the neoconservative foreign policy establishment, which is music to my ears. We'll discuss. Stay tuned. Out with the old, in with the new grand old party. President Trump has all but cemented a new path forward on the national security front. He's broken with Republican hawks, fired top military officials, including the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, and has even taken steps toward Russia on the world stage. Simply put, Trump has remodeled the GOP in his own image without much pushback. Joining us now to dive into the new national security model is Burgess Everett, a journalist at Semaphore. welcome to Rising.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you with us. So I think this is, a phenomenon that even people who don't follow politics super closely have now caught on to, that Trump has totally changed the foreign policy of the Republican Party, such that you can find people like Marco Rubio, his own Secretary of State, doing and saying things as recently as 2 years ago that are totally at odds with the things he does and says now as Trump's Secretary of State. Do you think this is actually a permanent shift, or if Trump were to somehow magically disappear, or this is his final term, he's done in 4 years, will the Republican Party reflexively transform back into the way it was in the preceding decades?
It feels pretty permanent to me, and I say that for a couple of reasons. One is Trump's heir apparent is J.D. Vance. I think he's probably even more of a reliable steward of this sort of non-interventionist, they don't like being called isolationists, non-interventionist way of thinking. He's obviously probably the most logical successor to Trump in 2028 when we get there. And then when you just look at the lineup of who is coming into Congress and who is leaving, the more traditional Republicans who would be called hawks, the John McCain wing of the party, who are kind of aligned with the George W. Bush way of thinking, they're on their way out. And the people, the youngest folks, the newest folks coming in the Senate and the House are far more aligned with Trump and J.D. Vance. You can even see it on the Senate Armed Service Committee, which is basically split between these more senior members who kind of came in before Trump, came into Congress or politics, and then folks who came in after Trump. So it feels like a permanent shift to me, because Trump has worked hard behind the scenes to transform the party in these primaries and safe red states to get people that are simpatico with him from when he was in office to when he was out of office. And it feels like there's probably no turning back.
And, how is this impacting the electoral possibilities for the Republican Party? I think there is a sentiment among certain conservatives that they all, the primary voters, the base, always kind of wanted a less interventionist foreign policy, was skeptical of foreign aid. Now, of course, there's, there's exaggeration of what part of the budget is foreign aid, but there was a kind of hostility to nation building and world policing and those kinds of things that just Republican leadership didn't quite get, but now they get it, or they've been forced to get it. Does this actually make them a more formidable party in terms of electoral success?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's super popular to get the United States entangled in foreign conflicts in general elections. I actually don't necessarily think voters vote on national security issues, especially foreign policy ones, as much as folks here in Washington like to think. And, I think you could probably see that through supporting Ukraine. There's a ton of reasons to support them in terms of our own national security and keeping alliances with our friends in Europe, including Ukraine. But I don't know that voters rewarded people who voted for Ukraine funding in the same way that they have a revulsion. Many of them have a revulsion for people who did vote for it, especially in GOP-based politics. I think that when you look at the incoming, these members get negatively. The folks who say and do things that are positive to Ukraine, you can tell that it attracts negative attention in the Republican Party now. Now, some people kind of shrug that off or balance it. Folks like Tom Tillis, who's definitely a Ukraine hawk, and he is careful about how he talks about it and careful about what he says, but he's trying to be consistent there. And people like him are pushing back in kind of these gentle ways. They say, well, no, it's not Ukraine who started the war with Russia. It was Russia. But there's not a ton of teeth behind that. And I think that's a big difference between this Trump administration and the last one 8 years ago, because not only did you have Republicans in Congress who would contradict and publicly break with the president pretty consistently, folks like McCain, even Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell when he was the leader. But you also had people in the Trump administration who were kind of checks on President Trump's non-interventionist tendencies, people like James Mattis and beyond. That's all changed, even Marco Rubio, as you said, who would have obviously been a check on Trump in terms of ideology. He's not really serving that purpose right now. He's more more interested in sort of implementing the Trump agenda and being simpatico with him. So again, like the shift is pretty remarkable, and it's not even playing out in terms of an ugly fight anymore, because it feels like the Trump wing of the party has just won and are kind of thumbing their nose at the old school hawks.
But looking at how the old school hawks are, is this, there's the politics internally, but when we look at how we are positioned externally, is this weakening our position, and will this weaken the United States overall?
I mean, look, it was a surprise to a lot of folks how the U.S. voted in that United Nations resolution earlier this week, siding with Russia against Ukraine and something on the Ukraine war. I think Democrats feel kind of lonely advocating for USAID, soft power, international development, and also funding Ukraine. So I do think when you look at our country's politics from the outside, from another country, we don't look like we're on the same page. We look pretty divided, and that certainly doesn't help sell yourself to other countries when you're doing diplomacy. They see a United States that's divided pretty painfully on ideological lines on things like national security and foreign policy, whereas I feel like even 10 years ago, there was a little bit more of a consensus among both parties to do so, and I do think that gave us more heft on the world stage.
Burgess Everett, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Sure, thanks for your interest.
Evan Barker was a former Democratic operative. During her time, she helped raise $50 million for Democrats. Now she calls herself an independent who voted for Trump. She says Democrats turned their backs on her and her family. In a recent Substack, she laid out why, as a young woman, she was drawn to voting for President Trump and his policies, but she also has a word of caution about one of the potential cuts that she believes would have many GOP supporters running the other way. Evan is a writer and podcaster who lives in San Francisco, and she joins us now to tell us about her political journey and what she sees ahead. Welcome to Rising.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to speak with you. We especially love, talking to people who don't fit neatly into partisan political boxes. So, why don't you describe for us your thought process over the last year in terms of the election?
Right, absolutely. So, as you previously stated, I am a former Democratic operative. I've worked in Democratic politics off and on since 2008, so that's most of my adult life. I first voted for Barack Obama when I just turned 18, when he was running for president. And part of the reason I initially got involved in Democratic politics is because I was born with a serious lung disease similar to cystic fibrosis called primary ciliary dyskinesia. And so as a teenager, I was very, very concerned about going to college. If I went to college, I'm a first generation college graduate, actually. Neither of my parents went to school. But I was worried about, if I did go to school, what my insurance situation would look like. So I got involved in politics at a young age, and thankfully, Barack Obama did pass the ACA. And that sort of propelled me into a debt of gratitude towards the Democratic Party. And over the years, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, I have seen them radically shift and basically turn their backs on the cultural sensibilities of working class people, as well as some policies related to working class people as well. And so, this past election, I went to the DNC. I had taken a couple of years off of politics to raise my son, and decided to go to the DNC to see if I wanted to, get back involved right before the election. And instead of feeling re-inspired, I actually felt more sure than ever that I no longer wanted to work for them. And, part of that was just seeing the coronation of Kamala Harris, a candidate who I felt like was so far removed from the pulse of working class people in this country, who had no idea how to speak to them, who didn't know how to articulate any sort of economic vision for the pain that I felt like people in this country were going through at the time. People like my grandma and my mom who live in Missouri, who live just on their Social Security checks and were having a really, really difficult time purchasing groceries and paying for rent and just getting by. And so, when I left the Democratic Party last August after going to the DNC, I posted a video on TikTok. I did not expect to go viral. It did. It ended up getting like 15 million views. And I didn't actually foresee myself voting for Donald Trump either when I posted that video. I thought I was going to just set the election out or, maybe vote third party. But I ended up going to one of his rallies and I listened to what he had to say. And a lot of it was what I had yearned for Democrats to say for years. And due to that, I decided to give him a shot and I voted for him.
So what do you make of the Trump administration so far, an administration that has empowered Elon Musk and others to make some significant cuts, or people are debating how significant the cuts are to government processes to get rid of some employees? The thrust of this opinion piece you just wrote is that you think going after some of the fundamental entitlement services that people expect from their government would be political suicide. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I do. And in fact, it's much in the way that I felt like the Democratic Party, by not addressing the issue of immigration in any sort of serious way in this last election and doubling down on DEI and wokeness and identity politics, I thought that was political suicide. So much in the way that I thought that they were making a huge unforced error, I also think that House Republicans, with this current resolution to slash $1 trillion from Medicaid, is a huge unforced error. I think you guys actually just released a poll the other day showing that 71% of Trump supporters don't support slashing Medicaid. And I think right now there's sort of a misunderstanding where a lot of people on the right just believe that this is going to be waste, fraud, and abuse. And I'm all for getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, but this is actually a wholesale cut. The way that it's currently written, it is a wholesale cut. It is $1 trillion. And basically, there's no way, if you do the math, even if you remove all of the non-medical aspects of the House Energy Committee, right, there's still going to be a $600 million gap. And so some way or another, people that currently have their health insurance through Medicaid are going to see a loss of healthcare coverage. And 72 million people in this country have Medicaid. Many of them live in red states. People in states like California might be okay. Maybe California raises taxes and they figure out a way to, cover some of the loss from the federal government. But people in red states, they don't have that kind of tax revenue available to them from their constituents. A lot of them, a lot of these states are much poorer. And so I think it's a grave mistake for House Republicans to want to do this. And I have seen some Republicans speak out against it, like Josh Hawley, the senator who represents my mother and my grandmother in Missouri. He's come out and he said that he has concerns as well, probably because Missouri is a state that elected him, a Republican populist senator, but also voted to expand Medicaid. And so he knows that many of his constituents rely on Medicaid.
Evan, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think that all of us need to be hearing why, not just why you switched over, but I think you laid out pretty well the reasons why and what you feel that the administration should or what they should not do with the budget. My question to you is, what happens if they do slash it? I know it's going to impact millions of Americans that you just stated, but how will that make you feel about having given the reins to this administration that we've seen make a lot of cuts that are damaging and are hurting a lot of American workers?
Well, first of all, I think Donald Trump himself has done quite a few of really, really good things so far, actually. Basically securing the border, that helps working class people. This may not be popular to say in liberal circles, but When you have mass unfettered illegal immigration, that does suppress working class wages. He also appointed a very, very pro-labor secretary to lead the Department of Labor, as well as a pro-labor person to lead OSHA. So he's not just doing things that blanketly hurt workers. I want to say that. And also he hasn't chosen to sign off onto this piece of legislation either. We still got to get through reconciliation with the Senate, and there's still going to be compromises that are made. However, if the Republicans do go through with this, I will be incredibly disappointed. Part of the reason that I held back from, originally thinking that I was going to switch and vote for Donald Trump was because of what happened the first time around with the ACA. I admit the ACA has a lot of problems. It's made health insurance unaffordable for a lot of middle-class people. However, it also has a lot of good things in it too, like subsidies that we don't know if they're going to be renewed by the end of this year. There's been no guarantee to renew these subsidies. And so, I think that I would be incredibly disappointed. It hasn't happened yet, which is why I'm here sounding the alarm. Like I'm saying, there are a lot of people that are similar to me, that are independent minded, that might even be disaffected Democrats who have seen the left go too far to the left on social issues over the last 4 years and not talk enough about working class issues, and that, decided to vote for Donald Trump. And I think that this would be damaging to the MAGA movement. And so I really, really hope that they see that too, and that there's some sort of reconciliation that can happen in the Senate. And ultimately, I hope President Trump vetoes the bill if this cut remains.
Evan, thank you so much for joining us today. Fascinating conversation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Another week of movement on immigration.
And this time, the Trump administration appears to be borrowing a page from the McCarthy era.
Not sure that's how I would describe it, but some Democrats probably are. The Trump administration is asking undocumented immigrants to sign up to a newly created national registry with the goal of self-deportation.
And that's what was done after World War II to ID communists. The Department of Homeland Security announced earlier this week that anyone over the age of 13 who is here illegally must comply or face fines and/or imprisonment.
Meanwhile, it's no surprise then that the ladies of The View got into it this week over this subject. View host Alyssa Farah Griffin and Sonny Hostin disagreed about border security. Let's watch.
The point is, he was all about immigration from the southern border, and those immigrants or those migrants look a certain way. So it seems to me this was never really just about immigration. It was about a certain type of immigrant. And so now we have these
Can I just clarify though?
Can I finish talking?
Yes.
Thank you. So it's okay for Russian oligarchs to come over. It's okay for people with money to come over, but it's not okay to provide a path to citizenship for people that have been here, like the DACA recipients, for other people that look a different way.
Alyssa Farah Griffin then fact-checked Sonny Hostin. Let's watch that.
Just to clarify, because there is a border crisis on the northern border, and it doesn't get nearly as much attention as the southern. The numbers aren't as high. It is not Canadians crossing from Canada into the United States.
Who is it?
It is Mexico and India are the two largest places that people are coming, because they're seeing that it's actually easier than going through the cartels and going through a more secure southern border. So if they have the resources, that's what the northern immigration has nothing to do with Canadians.
Yeah, I think that's some tone-deaf commentary from Sonny Hostin. I just don't think it's the case that the frustration with illegal immigration that is a bipartisan concern, that is something Trump won a lot of independents and otherwise Democratic-leaning voters on, the perception that there are too many people coming across not just our southern border, as Alyssa Farah Griffin pointed out, and it's not you can say, oh, it's just racism to be against that. I don't think that's a winning political message. I think it's proven not to be a winning political message. I think Americans are perfectly willing to take immigrants. We are a nation of immigrants. We descend from immigrants, many of us, and immigrants that are going to come here and contribute to the country and work and participate in our economy, that's all good, but we want it done legally, and we should. I support changing the process to make it easier for people who want to work to come here. That's why I'm actually all for letting, if rich people want to buy their way in, that's fine with me, I don't care. But we need to fix the problem of having people being smuggled in by cartels, and then we have to deport people who commit violent crimes here. There is no public will to allow them to just roam our cities, causing public disorder. They have to go.
I have no problem with deporting illegal immigrants who are breaking the law. I do think that we have to have a pathway to citizenship. I do, and we need to make it easier. I think we also have to really start looking at and talking about the real cause of why there's so many people that are coming here. For the last few years, a lot of it has been because they see an economy that was doing better than most of the world. And that, in part, is because we are a country of immigrants. And so this whole conversation, this political divide that we continue to have about talking about immigration and immigrants and how people are getting in, as you were just talking, I had to think about what the former president from Mexico said. You guys are like talking about building a wall. You're not thinking that most of our people are not coming across the wall.
Those people overstaying visas.
And they're just overstaying the visas. Yeah. So, when we keep talking about immigration has for centuries been an issue that has divided Americans.
Yeah.
Yet, so many different communities are byproduct of immigration or immigrants who came here. The president's parents came here. Elon Musk is an immigrant. We're not talking about them. And yes, there are people who have come here who have created and are doing really well financially. This overall piece, though, continues to be that the burden that illegal immigrants or immigration is putting on the country. This conversation here we're having, we're talking about, it's a conversation that deserves to be heard. There is a different emphasis that happens at the south of the border than we do with Canada. But our neighbors at the north, we're consider ourselves more friendlier to them. Yeah. Is it because they're English speaking? And is it because it's Spanish speaking?
People that overstay their visas are not contributing to the same kind of problem than people who are swimming across the Rio Grande and then contributing to an instability as they're just trying to process so many people at once. There's instability in border towns. Within New York, the difficulty they've had having to turn the Roosevelt Hotel into temporary housing for them. People who come in and overstay they have a position, they have a place to stay, and then they're illegal immigrants because the visa expires. That is a different problem than having masses of people directed by cartels streaming across the southern border. That needs to be dealt with. I agree with Elon Musk. I'm in the category with Elon Musk of let's get more high-skilled workers here. I support the H-1B visa program. I'm glad he sold that program to Trump. So the Republican Party is not right now going to be hostile to having people who contribute and work and make our country better coming here. That fight has been decided in favor of the pro-high-skilled immigration wing. Now, that's a little bit different from the problem we're facing on the southern border. And I found it remarkable, actually. This reminds me, you brought up Elon Musk, but yesterday I saw some Democrat, I don't know who it was a Democratic lawmaker standing outside railing against Elon Musk and questioning his loyalty because he is an immigrant and he's only been here for 20 years. Did you see this yesterday? It was really, really contemptible, really vile. And I think it shows how the Republican Party gets so knocked for being xenophobic and whole countries, etc. Man, did she reach for that pretty quickly? Elon, we're being run by some disloyal foreigner. Okay, lady.
But I also think that we have to look at what the optics show. So yes, this is someone who's an immigrant who came to America who is firing American workers. So there's that conversation. But going back to their conversation there, and in terms of immigration, we also have to look at, there are a lot of immigrants who come here and do the jobs that a lot of Americans don't want to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, Americans didn't want to do the job of cutting the government, and we got an immigrant to do it instead. I'm all for it. Great.
Good point.
Win-win.
Good point. But here's the other part of it. We keep vilifying immigrants, but we don't ask what is it our policies, United States policies that have made it necessary for people to feel the need to come here, whether or not is our intervention policy where we're going in and we're Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, all the things that we've been doing globally does have an impact, and it is a reason why we have so many people that are coming here. So many reasons why we feel as if that we have to take care of people because this is what we do for our own livelihood. This is what we do for our economy. And there's so many other questions, whatever, that go along with that. But in terms of their conversation and making this about race, again, that is part of the American system. There's our societal problems that we continue to talk about and vilify each other because we need something to argue about. And a lot of it keeps going back to immigration and going back to ethnicity and race and a whole number of other issues.
Well, people are coming here because our policies have destabilized their countries. In that way, here's where my side of the right and even maybe the far left can find some agreement. I disagree with a lot of our foreign policy, with interventionism, with nation building, and so I don't want to destabilize the world such that then people come here fleeing political violence after their leaders were overthrown by our governments. I would just fix that by not doing those policies anymore. No more of that. No more regime change.
But we're not having those conversations, and that's where I'm getting to, is that we just keep talking about people coming here. We're not talking about the reasons why people are coming here. And I don't think that many people want to leave their homes where they're born, but they just want to be able to say that I can live somewhere safely, be a very good citizen. A lot of immigrants are coming here and paying taxes, but they don't get the benefits of being a resident within their state. But they're paying taxes. So we there are a lot of questions that go further in terms of this immigration debate. I think it's unfortunate often when we have the immigration debate that is largely yesterday the Hispanic and Latino community that's out front of that, because there are a lot of other people that are part of that conversation. But again, within America, I think that we have to start looking at this, one, as a whole, but also recognizing, I think Democrats have an opportunity here to talk about how immigrants do help the American economy and help us as Americans, and that we really are just a nation of immigrants, unless you're Native American.
That's true. Lots more to talk about today on Rising. We'll be back with more right after this. As artificial intelligence and deepfakes get more and more advanced, the chances of one getting duped are getting higher and higher, and that's exactly what happened to some people yesterday, including the DNC. Now, there's a clip going around of what appeared to be, but is not, Donald Trump Jr.'s voice on his podcast talking about the Ukraine and Russia war and coming out in favor of sending weapons to Russia. It turns out this audio is a deepfake. It is not Don Jr. saying this. Listen for yourself.
I honestly can't imagine anyone in their right mind picking Ukraine as an ally when Russia is the other option. I mean, just think about it. Massive nuclear power, loaded with natural resources everyone needs, literally the biggest country on the planet. Honestly, if anything, the U.S. should have been sending weapons to Russia.
To be abundantly clear, that is fake. He did not say that. Republican strategist Andrew Surabian, a representative for Trump Jr., confirmed that the video was fake. Mediaite also noted that Trump Jr.'s podcast episode yesterday did not contain those comments. Now, while it's unclear who first created it, Washington Free Beacon reporter Chuck Ross noted that the first two big accounts pushing it were Visagrad24 and Polymarket Intel. Some major accounts that posted it include Fact Post and Republicans Against Trump. Both of these accounts then deleted those posts. The DNC launched Fact Post in January after Trump got elected. Fact Post. Chief Mobilization Officer of the DNC, Shelby Cole, said in a statement after the launch, quote, "The Republican disinformation machine is powerful, but we believe a stronger weapon is giving people the facts about how Trump and his administration are screwing over the American people."
Republicans Against Trump posted on X, "We deleted a video that was circulating on social media allegedly showing Don Jr. saying the U.S. should have aligned with and armed Russia instead of Ukraine. As soon as we found out it was fake, AI generated, Don Jr. has made many horrible remarks about Ukraine and President Zelensky in the past, which is why so many people believed he might have said this." A DNC spokesperson told ABC that they nuked the post as soon as they found out it was fake and that they have a clear policy against misinformation.
Bulwark White House correspondent Andrew Egger wrote on X, "Honestly, a very unsettling fake. Listening to it again just now, even knowing it was AI, I genuinely could not tell it was not actually Don Jr. The latest round of audio models can be so good as make fakes orally indistinguishable, which I'm sure will help our discourse a lot." Yeah, so this was fake. His comment that we should actually send weapons to Russia, he did not say that. Saw a lot of people get duped by it. I think Andrew Eggers has a point that it was a pretty impressive fake. It does sound like him, although one might say it would have raised your eyebrow to go, did he really say we should send Russia weapons? Is that even if you're more in the we should not arm Ukraine, sort of MAGA contingent. That's not America First to say we should send weapons to Russia. We're saying we should not send weapons to anyone. We should not be involved in this conflict. So maybe that should have raised attention. More broadly, though, my point in all this was, there's this whole industry of so-called misinformation watchdog people. I hate the word misinformation personally. I'm like, the people who wield that, I think, do it in such bad faith. But there's all these fact checkers and nonprofits and organizations monitoring, policing misinformation online. They never catch anything where it's an example of Democrats or progressives engaging in misinformation, right? This was caught by conservative social media accounts, by Mediaite, which is a perfectly good media institution. It was not caught by any misinformation expert who monitors this stuff, which to me, the fact checker didn't catch it, which to me just exposes this as a sham industry. It was caught by your usual online suspects, and there's no special expertise that comes with identifying misinformation because the misinformation experts don't have any special skills and are not adept at identifying it. That's my hot take for you.
Totally different, but I'm going to try to use this as an example. A few years ago, a hero of mine, Nelson Mandela, passed away. But before he had passed away, a year before he passed away, there were social media posts that kept saying, "Rest in peace, Nelson Mandela was such a great leader," etc. But people saw it one place and they automatically ran with it. That's what we have within the social media piece. That's why it's so important to have credible media sources. And now the truth of the matter is, he has said a lot of things that were just like off the wall that it would make it believable that he could have said that. Mm-hmm. But in this case, yes, the fact checkers didn't catch it, but I think we do need to have fact checkers. And I think that we do need to continue to have someone that's policing, at least when I say policing, people probably don't like that word, but at least to make sure that what we're getting is verifiable, that is credible.
Well, we need fact checkers to police their own side, though. That's what I'm saying. They're only policing things conservatives get wrong, and there's not enough self-reflection. That's my criticism of this whole industry. That the same people who will say, "Oh yes, there's this Republican misinformation complex," were the same people who said that the Hunter Biden laptop story was misinformation, that this was Russian disinfo, that this is being pumped out to you by Russia. No, it's not.
Yeah,
it was not. They were wrong. They got that one wrong.
A few years ago, people, on the left talked about Sarah Palin, and they kept using gotcha, and she kept saying, "Hey, I don't want to have this gotcha moment." I'm not, But the reality is that is what social media has become. It's all about gotcha. It's all about who do we get next? Because a lot of this is being generated by emotion, not by logic. And a lot of it is we're not trained to think anymore. We're just reacting. And so when people saw that, unfortunately, they ran with it. They didn't fact check it. They didn't check it. They didn't verify it. And so we are talking about it here.
As deepfakes get more impressive, it will be important, really just for people, to train yourself not to, and this is true even of videos that are not actually fake, but just lack proper context. If you see something, some 6 seconds of a video online and you're outraged by it, it always is helpful to wait. Before you fire up that like or that retweet button or comment on it, just wait. Let's see if there's some broader context. Let's see if there's, this was true of the story that made me, that I am most known for commenting on the kids at the Lincoln Memorial, the Covington kids, where they got, branded vicious racist for this confrontation with this Native American activist. And then when more video came out, it really complicated the initial portrait of, especially that the main kid had been in this guy's way. He had actually not been in the guy's way. That whole thing, there were a lot of apologies. They sued multiple media organizations. If you just wait, I agree with you. People are letting emotion get ahead of things. Just calm down and wait. And we're all going to be a lot better at discerning and saying, okay, but is that too good? Does that make my side look so good? Is that too good to be true? Well, that's like in this case, I'm sure Democrats were salivating at the idea of Don Jr. pledging fealty to Russia. Okay, but is that too good to be true for you? Can you maybe just chill out a little bit? That will be good advice for everyone.
Yeah, it'd be nice if people just kind of wait. There's a scene in the show from years ago, The Newsroom, where the news and the upstairs wanted to run with a story. And the anchor says, "No, wait, we need to get 3 verifiable sources." We still have to get back to somehow where there's about making sure that we get it right, as opposed to wanting to be the first or wanting to be the one to have a gotcha moment, because it can be flipped, and they got them.
Well, that does it for us today on Rising. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can listen to podcasts. See you later.